Hey 918ers, it's the Geekboy here, and I am coming at you with my long overdue review of Star Trek Picard Season 3. Now, most of our longtime followers know that I have not been the biggest fan of modern Star Trek. The reasons are many, and I don't feel the need to rehash them in this video. Even more specifically, I really disliked the first two seasons of Star Trek Picard, so you can imagine how I felt when they announced that the entire Star Trek The Next Generation cast was going to come back for Season 3. To say I was underwhelmed was putting it mildly. Beyond that, I was actually a bit angry. I'd already suffered through 2 seasons of watching my hero, Captain Picard, being sidelined in his own show. And I was afraid they were going to, perform a similar form of character assassination on the rest of the crew. But then I began to hear things. Rumblings from Trek fans who shared my same sensibilities, who had been given the opportunity to experience some or all of Picard Season 3 before anyone else. They were commenting about how Season 3's showrunner, Terry Matalas, had brought a real love of Trek and its lore and its characters to this season. They'd made sure to say that a lot of the visual effects work was still in flux. Some of the music was still temp-tracked, as they like to call it. They had some nitpicks, but overall, they enjoyed it. But most of all, they were hopeful. Some even said that it gave the Next Generation crew the glorious send-off that they deserved, the way the original series cast got in Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country. And then that trailer dropped. So a few weeks ago, I gave my reaction to the final trailer to Picard Season 3, and based on what I saw, as I said, I landed in the cautiously optimistic camp. There were still a lot of sins of modern Trek on display in it, but the crew was there. They seemed to be acting like themselves. They seemed to have camaraderie and friendship amongst themselves. The ships looked like Star Trek ships again, at least on the outside. And the story looked grand and sprawling and epic. But I was still skeptical. I mean, this is all well documented in my reaction video to the trailer, so feel free to check it out if you'd like. But that skepticism is the very reason I have not been doing week-to-week reviews of the episodes. I know a lot of folks that know of my love of Trek. They were probably really surprised at that, but let me tell you the reason why. You see, both seasons of Picard so far started out pretty decently, only to descend into nearly unwatchable drivel by the time the final episodes aired. So I didn't want to get sucker punched again. At the most, that great trailer had given me hope and ensured that I would at least tune back in for the final season. And I remember I gave, the premieres of both years 1 and 2 high marks, only to realize that the story that unfolded was nowhere near as clever as the writers thought it was. So, I was no stranger to disappointment. And so that was one of the reasons. But there was another reason. And that is this. As the episodes began rolling out, I found myself all at once nostalgic, excited, and enthralled at what I was seeing. I mean, there was an excellent season premiere episode 1 rolled into a great episode 2, which dovetailed into a great pair of episodes 3 and 4. They weren't perfect, but it was probably about as close to perfect as a fan could probably hope for in the era that we're living in now. And about that time, I made a bargain with myself. I would not review this season until it was done. Maybe to avoid spoilers, maybe to be able to craft a competent overview of the season with its story and its mysteries all laid bare. But mostly, I was afraid that the minute I would sing its praises, this show would faceplant like it had its first 2 years. I didn't want the promise of a refreshing trip to the Trek well evaporating like a mirage in the desert that has become our landscape of good entertainment. So that being said, I am here with my review of Star Trek Picard Season 3, and it is glorious. It is not perfect, but it is so good, and it does so much right. Its shortcomings are easy to forgive, if not overlook, mainly because showrunner Terry Matalas has managed to snatch victory from the jaws of defeat in the same vein as Captain James T. Kirk or Captain Jean-Luc Picard. But more importantly, he has crafted a love letter to Star Trek fans that may never be equaled. He has certainly earned his Trek Street credit by peppering the story with callbacks, references, and, if you'll forgive the pun, lore, both overt and obtuse, that should please all Trek fans, but he's also created a story that's acceptable to even the most casual Trek viewer. In addition to the main Next Generation cast, he's created a host of new characters that, to my shock, are great. They all have arcs, they all work thematically with the story, and for the most part, they really work individually as characters. One of them, I believe he is well on his way to becoming a fan favorite, and that would be none other than the character of Captain Liam Shaw of the USS Titan. From the footage on the trailer, you could easily think he's just another one of these patsy-type captains put in the story just to make our characters look good, or in this modern era of storytelling, you could be forgiven for thinking that he's the obligatory toxic male who needs to be taken down a notch by someone, but neither could be further from the truth. Actor Todd Stashwick imbues this character with equal parts snark, pathos, authority, and heroism. And it's not just his performance. I mean, the character is well written. He has quite understandable motivations, and while he kind of comes to us fully formed when we meet him, as his layers are gradually peeled back over the course of the season, we discover that along with his attitude, he's not only a good and thoughtful captain, but he's a decent tactician, a pretty talented engineer as well. So yeah, he's great. We also have a new character played by Ed Speleers, who gives a tremendous performance that's filled with gravitas, humor, intensity, sometimes all in the same scene. Now, his identity I'm not going to spoil for the sake of anyone who hasn't watched the show yet, but suffice it to say, by about episode 3, we're pretty much on the way to figuring out who he is, much like William Riker is. I've talked in my reaction trailer about the villain, Vadic. She's played by Amanda Plummer, and she's kind of positioned as the season's big bad. She certainly makes some next-level acting choices, I'll say that. I think she probably deserves a slot in the Trek villain pantheon. I mean, she's no Khan or Kang or Gul Dukat, but she certainly commands the screen anytime she's on it, even if I do think that her story spends a little too much time, unfolding. They take a little too much time to get her plot line going and engaged. But, enough about the new characters. I know what everyone is wondering. Do they do justice to our beloved crew of the USS Enterprise D? And I will say the answer is a resounding yes. Every character is brought back into the fold in meaningful ways. Kind of like what they did in Star Trek The Motion Picture, when every character in that movie comes back and they all kind of come back in with their moment, and that's kind of what they do here. Everyone is kind of given their moment to shine, but they also have meaningful arcs which really inform and develop as the story moves along. I especially have to tip my hat to Terry Matalas and the writers for really exploiting two of Next Generation's most underutilized assets, and those are the characters of Dr. Crusher and Deanna Troi. Each of them has a big part to play in the story. We both get to see them do things that we've never gotten to see them do before, and we see them in a way that we haven't seen before, so that was really neat. When we catch up to Worf and Geordi, they are both doing things that we can imagine them doing as fans, and in a pretty good twist. Not everyone is happy to be getting the TNG band back together under the circumstances, but it's still great. It all works out. As was showcased in the trailer, Brent Spiner is back, giving probably another career best Trek performance, but that's all I can say without spoiling the fun. And lastly, Picard and Riker. They have this whole Butch and Sundance bromance thing going that is just sheer joy and perfection to watch. The show takes their relationship from the original Next Generation show and has moved it to its logical conclusion. But apart from the characters, Star Trek at its best has always been about good, smart science fiction. This is something that I think both Discovery and even the first 2 seasons of Picard have been sorely lacking in, but this season delivers it in spades. There are clever uses of things we've seen in other franchises. Particularly, there's an experimental weapon that Vadic has managed to get her hands on that is used in a neat way. There's also medical mysteries. Is in episode 4 when the crew has to figure out a science mystery that's threatening to destroy the ship, and the way they do it, they're all collaborating and working together, each of them bringing their own talents to bear in a way that unlocks a piece of the puzzle, and it serves as a reminder of why this show was so good back in its day and how you can still have believable, mature, engaging drama without resorting to CW-style melodrama or our characters just crying in corridors. It's also a great example of how you use fan service, a term which somehow has gotten a negative connotation, but which I think is a good thing if it truly is fan service, that is, in service of the show's die-hard and hardcore fans. And Picard Season 3 is loaded with it, but it's deployed appropriately and in just the right levels. It's not this, what I like to call nostalgia bait, that's become prevalent in our franchises today, where they kind of tease us with characters and images from our beloved shows, only to have these characters disrespected and deconstructed in service of a story that doesn't resemble anything we've come to know or love or even want. They did manage to steer clear of all that kind of stuff this year, and they've made these characters, the ones that we fell in love with all these years ago, and reaffirm why we would follow Jean-Luc Picard and this crew into hell with just a water pistol. Now, with all my gushing over this, you must be thinking, Geekboy, surely you have some issues with this show. And there are. I do have some issues with it. Most of them have to do with some of the things that the season was saddled with, based on what I consider to be some poor narrative choices from season 1 and 2. But I do have to say, what they couldn't retcon, they used to their best advantage. Give an example. I was highly critical of the choice to basically, at the end of season 1, kill Picard and transfer his essence into an android body. Now, I know Star Trek has been playing around with this idea for decades, all the way back to the original series when they did What Are Little Girls Made Of? But Picard Season 1 didn't really explore that concept in any kind of new or meaningful way. It was basically a deus ex machina, kind of a quick solution to the corner they'd written themselves into. That being said, the fact that Picard is now in a synthetic body is exploited pretty much for humor in the first 2/3 of the season, but becomes a major plot twist that resonates through the end of the season. Another one of the things that I hated from season 1 was the idea that they saddled Riker and Troy with a dead child. But again, the writers this season, they mine that for dramatic gold. We come to find out that Riker hasn't really been dealing with that grief as well as he wants everyone to think he has. Plus, it also kind of shades Riker and Troy's relationship in a new light, as we see, she's been using her empathic powers to try to help her Imzadi handle and process this loss in a way that, I don't necessarily know that was good for Riker. And so, Riker's attitude shapes some of his major decisions in the first quarter of the season, and it breaks one of the Gene Roddenberry mandates, which was it brings Riker and Picard into conflict, but it's so organically done, and it's so logical that you don't ever question it. It's great. In addition to this, there are a few kind of hand-wavy moments, where some of the plot points or dramatic developments are involved. And there are a few sections of the story that drag out a bit too long. First of all, Rafi's plot line at the beginning, where she's kind of undercover for Starfleet intelligence, it is necessary to the story, and it has a satisfying climax, but there are times where it seems to kind of slow the episodes down a bit. Now, I'm not criticizing Michelle Hurd as an actress. I love her, and I think that she does great stuff with the material, but I just feel like her storyline is intercut with this much more engaging plot aboard the USS Titan that, honestly, as a viewer and as a Trek fan, I never wanted to cut away from. Another pacing issue arrives about episodes 7 and 8. This again involves Vadic and her, big bad, motivation type thing. And for me, it just has the crew chasing their tails a bit too much. Again, it's not bad stuff by any means. All of it's really good in its individual parts, but I just think that with some judicious editing, episodes 7 and 8 could have been condensed into one story. Although I will add that upon rewatching them, they play better being able to watch them back to back as kind of a two-parter within this 10-part story. There's also the mystery surrounding exactly who Ed Speleer's character is, and that they maybe stretched the dramatic tension a bit too far. But again, that's more emblematic of the modern streaming model itself. It's not native to this show. And the revelation of the show's true villain is liable to elicit some eye rolls from longtime Trek fans, as it seems there's one particular creation that Star Trek just can't seem to move beyond. But in spite of these few missteps, the show manages to do one thing that a lot of these series can't, and that is it sticks the friggin' landing. Oh my gosh, the minor sins committed earlier in the show's run are all forgiven by the time we get to the fan-pleasing affair that is episodes 9 and 10. If there is any doubt that Terry Matalas doesn't love Trek as much as we do, just wait for the climax of episode 9. There will not be a dry eye in the house. And I'm speaking from experience, as I was nearly washed away in tears of nerd joy. Okay? When the final missing cast member that we didn't even know was missing rejoins the crew. Now, all these developments come together in the final episode for a finale that is exciting, it's satisfying, it's suspenseful, and it's heartwarming. And it really does give the Next Generation crew a proper send-off the way their cinematic voyages never did. Additionally, there is a great setup for a potential spin-off series that I certainly hope the brain trusts at Paramount greenlight and give Terry Matalas the reins to. So, this final season of Picard was akin to revisiting old friends that we loved but forgot just how much we did. In addition, this season of the show became appointment for TV for me. And I can't stress that enough. For the past 10 weeks, it was appointment television. I can't remember a time when I actually anticipated a certain day every week so I could watch the next episode of a show I wanted to see. That was a development that was apparently shared by a good majority of the audience because this was the first of the new Trek shows to crack the Nielsen Top 10. So Paramount, pay attention. You have got something here. You know, I've said in the past, there were a handful of movies and shows that were master classes in how you kind of redevelop an old or moribund franchise for a contemporary audience. And those are the Creed films, Cobra Kai, Ghostbusters Afterlife, Top Gun Maverick. Okay? And it warms my heart to no end, 918ers, that I can tell you I can now add Picard Season 3 to that list. Watch it. You'll remember why you fell in love with these characters to begin with, and if you're like me, you'll be surprised just how sad you are that the visit with these old friends only lasts 10 episodes. But again, take it in and enjoy it for what it is. Until next time, this is the Geek Boy, signing off. Peace.